today I'm going to talk to you about the changing landscape that we find ourselves in. Specifically, the media landscape and some of the technology changes that are happening. And specifically, I'm going to look at 5 key trends and how you might, within your teams, look to kind of, first of all, understand them and then do something about it. Before I do that, I've got 3 very quick slides for those of you who aren't familiar with ClickIQ. We are an automated talent attraction platform. Basically, we use lots of clever technology, machine learning, programmatic technology to effectively manage and optimize our clients' recruitment advertising in real time. We win lots of awards. We're UK-based, private equity-backed, and we have a lot of great clients. In terms of what that means, because people have been asked twice today, are you a bit like Broadbean? We're not like Broadbean. I said maybe 20 years ago. We actually do work with Broadbean and are integrated with Broadbean. But the way that we basically work is we take our clients' jobs, so we automatically take those jobs from their ATSs, we upload them into the platform, we analyze those jobs in terms of how easy or difficult they might be to fill. We then allocate them into specific campaigns, and then we push them out through a performance media network, and then track in real time and adjust in real time what spend is going on what jobs. And the result is that you get a much greater reach, and it's a much more efficient way of doing it, basically. In terms of who we work with, lots of big corporate clients. Sainsbury's, Argos is probably our largest clients. We have a couple of clients here today. Thank you, Ian. So, moving on quickly. 5 sort of key trends in terms of what is happening within the marketplace and how you can adapt your talent attraction to them. So the first one is the media changing landscape. I think unless you've been under a rock, you will have seen an awful lot of announcements in the last 12 months, probably last 3 months really. So Google for Jobs coming along. I don't know if you saw 2 weeks ago, LinkedIn announced all its Talent Hub ATS products. We've seen Indeed go even bigger in terms of acquiring pretty much anything that it can get its hands on across the globe. They recently actually put out some numbers, and now they're $1.9 billion of sales worldwide, Indeed, which is slightly terrifying. Facebook Jobs launched. I think we can all agree that that was terrible, but they did it. And interestingly, they're currently working on a one-click apply right now. So they're going to do some more stuff, and they're also talking about aggregating jobs as well as not just the jobs that are going on there. We actually ran a competition at RecFest, probably shouldn't say that, in the summer, and the competition was that you'd go into Google for Jobs and you'd see what job. Sorry, not Google for Jobs, Facebook for Jobs. You go into Facebook and you'd see what job they'd recommended. And Mel Hayes, who runs the in-house teams at Deco, she won because her dream job apparently was basically writing pornography. Who knew? We're also seeing the rise of the networks. So where multiple job boards are coming together and effectively acting as a single buying point. ZipRecruiter is probably the one that you may have heard of, but you certainly will hear more of. They recently, 2 weeks ago, did a fundraising round. They're only 5 years old. They raised $150 million off a $1.5 billion valuation. They got all the monies. We also see, actually, Stepstone as well, going down a similar route where they're merging Total and JobSite into one platform. So, again, this idea of network is increasing significantly. And then Microsoft, can't forget Microsoft. We sometimes don't remember that LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft. Microsoft also own Bing, not that anyone does that, but they do. And they also are buying things like GitHub, and they're paying huge amounts of money. So, Microsoft is someone that will integrate their tools into that existing Office environment that most people use, and they have their eye on this particular space. The other thing, actually, I saw also the other day is Uber apparently is going to launch a recruitment tool as well. So if you are after contractors and gig economy people, then you could go on the Uber platform and they'll do whatever it is that Uber does in a recruitment environment. So what do we think the future might look like? Every time I look at this, it feels slightly wrong because it's changing very rapidly. But for certain, Google, Facebook, Microsoft / Indeed, LinkedIn, and Indeed, are certainly going to be massive players in this particular market. We're also seeing an increase in their kind of idea of ecosystem. So they're buying technologies to keep you within their environments, and they're rapidly adding additional products to their existing base. We then have this job board cloud thing, and we're seeing massive consolidation within that particular sector. We often hear kind of, are job boards dead? And I'll be honest, I don't think they are, and I certainly hope they're not. But they will have to change. And part of that change is a reaction to these other big media owners. So Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, et cetera, they all work on a performance basis. And I think that we will see much more of that occurring within the job board world. I also think we'll see much more the idea of, instead of your content just being jobs, your content around the audiences, and this idea of building these niche communities. And I think niche job boards particularly have a particularly rosy future as they change and do that. And, I mentioned Git and Stack Overflow as well. These idea of, are they actually a job board, or are they, in fact, a community that has jobs on them, and then they make their revenue from the job boards? So as they move to this performance marketing, the other thing we'll see is much more automation and the idea of managing your advertising using technology. Talked about network buying and consolidation as well. So with all these changes, what is it that you have to do? You can't just sit there doing the same stuff that you did previously. The idea of posting and praying to get kind of responses in from job boards. We have to adapt our media strategy to account for what's out there. And what is very interesting, I think, is that each of these sort of big media owners have a very different approach. And depending on what you're after, depends really on what you want to use and when you want to use it. So Google for Jobs obviously is the biggest change. And I think the people that have been most affected by Google for Jobs is obviously Indeed, because they used to dominate the top of the rankings and less so now. I think, though, that said, Google for Jobs it's about reaching people at the beginning of their applicant journey. When they're starting to think about their jobs, they're researching stuff. And they haven't necessarily come to a conclusion yet. So what we're seeing is that actually not that many people are going from Google for Jobs to application. They're using it to research, find out about employers, and so on and so forth. What has been disappointing, I think, with Google for Jobs so far is that the employers' ATSs have not yet got all their jobs on there. And I think that's something that many have struggled with. And I think until that does happen, I think that Google for Jobs will not really fulfill its kind of potential. But in time, invariably they will, because why would you not? It's free. As long as your jobs are written in the right way, your data is structured properly, your ads will appear within Google for Jobs, and you'll get free advertising. In time, I imagine they will stick some AdWords-type sponsored advertising alongside, for sure. But in the short term, Google has very much stated that they are interested in shortening the applicant journey, and they're interested in promoting direct employers. So whilst there's a lot of job boards on there at the moment, I suspect in time that will change, and we'll see more direct employers. Indeed, what can I say? 1.9 billion. This year, they grew at 59% in Europe alone. They have their parent company, Recruit, it's a Japanese company. They have, for those of you who understand financial markets, they have a 60 times multiple on profit, which basically means that they can buy stuff, whatever they want, for very, very little. And they're using that power to their advantage to consolidate their position across the job board landscape. They're also adding in more and more tools. So Indeed Hire recently was launched in the US, which is basically a recruitment agency. So that's a market clearly Indeed are going after. I think they charge 10% of any hires. And what's interesting is, because all your jobs are in there, they know which of those jobs are not getting responses to. So they can then ring you up and upsell you to a recruitment offering. Quite clever. LinkedIn, I think, when it comes to sourcing white-collar workers, we all use that on a kind of day-to-day basis. Whether our candidates do is a subject for discussion, but certainly we do. Facebook have basically said that they want to be the LinkedIn of the blue-collar workers. So this idea that, particularly for when you're reaching passive candidates, Facebook has some incredible targeting. And I think that as they get more and more jobs and the matching improves, then in time, it will be a powerful thing. The one-click apply is interesting, but also slightly scary because you basically get thousands of applications of complete nonsense. But I think they'll work on that. And then finally, the job boards. The job boards, I think, will always exist when it comes to reaching active job seekers in a cost-effective way. I don't think you'll ever beat a job board in that particular thing. The other thing as the media gets more complex is the way that you think about how you manage your recruitment spend. So, the days at beginning of January, you would allocate across your 4 favorite job boards or your agency's favorite job boards for the next 12 months, I think has passed. And I do agencies a bit of a disservice here because a lot of them are actually much more sophisticated than this. But the idea of being able to know what in 10 months you're going to be recruiting and which job board is going to be right for that, I think has changed. And that we start to see this kind of hierarchy of where you want to be advertising. So you would start at the bottom because you want lots of volume and you want it as low cost as possible. And then as you increase the difficulty of hiring, you start to move up the triangle. So you start to look at different methods of sourcing, depends on how difficult that particular job is to hire. So at the very top of the triangle, you've got your sourcing, and then as you go down the triangle, you get cheaper and cheaper methods. So it's a case of trying to pick the right one to fit the right role at the right time, and then trying to individualize it. So differential marketing, every job is different and will look very different on a media plan. You can't have one thing that fits all. It's kind of obvious, but equally more complex. The second trend is this move towards performance buying. It's something that already has happened in the digital marketing world. It's already happened in the US, and it's happening right now within the UK and the European markets. And the thing that people, I think, immediately think of, right, we pay for a performance, so we pay for our clicks or our applications. That's really great. But actually, that's not the best thing about it. The best thing about performance advertising is that you advertise for free. So think about that. If you want to reach the best candidates, you can advertise for free. You can put your jobs far and wide to get the best reach that you possibly can to increase the chance to find the best candidates who are going to start in your organization. And then you pay for the responses, as opposed to in a traditional world where you pay to advertise, but then you don't pay for any responses. And I think it's that reach, particularly in a tight candidate market, that is really important. It increases the likelihood of you filling that particular job. The downside to that is obviously how do you manage that complexity in terms of advertising in lots of different places, and this is where the idea of network comes in. So single buying points that allow you to access multiple advertising channels is a key to it. The other thing that you'll start to need is the idea of automation to manage that spend, because if anyone has ever done has spent any money on Indeed, particularly, because they're big culprits, is that you can burn your budget really, really fast. And not only that, you can not necessarily burn it on the right stuff. Because the thing about when you're paying for clicks is what gets the most clicks, invariably the jobs with the highest responses that you don't want to get the clicks for, because actually you want the responses to come for the more difficult to fill roles. So effectively what the automation does is it takes your budget and it makes sure that it's only allocating what you want in terms of money-wise to the jobs that you want to do it. And to do this as a human being would require to never sleep, monitor every job in real time on every job board constantly. You just couldn't do it. And the reality is the technology does it way better than we do, and it's not particularly expensive either. Third trend, candidate shortages. I think nurses were mentioned earlier, and there's a great example of how do you reach those people that it is very, very difficult to find. And, we're in a full economy, so very little unemployment. So number of active job seekers is considerably down. So job board responses, in reality, are down because they're targeting active job seekers. We've got skill shortages. Someone mentioned, was it 85 million people lacking for jobs out there by 20, whenever it was. So you've got this massive supply and demand issue. So how do you then therefore source those people? And as I say, job boards alone are no longer enough. We have to look at other ways to reach those people. And rather handily, Facebook and Google, and this is why they are set to do a lot within this market, have tools that allow you to reach those passive candidates, because you're able to target to an unbelievable degree. So if you want to recruit a nurse, for example, within Facebook, you can put in nurse. And you can advertise within the news feed, forget about Facebook jobs for now, you can advertise in the news feed of people who are nurses. And not only that, you then have a way of converting them. And you have to think about how you do that, because the thing about passive job seekers is they're not sat there at their desk with their CV in hand ready to apply for your job. So we have to think, how do we get those people to engage with us as employers and to apply for our jobs? So I think we'll see a lot more passive targeting happening, and this is something actually the agencies are particularly good at. Trend 4, change in demographic. So the rise of millennials and Gen Zs, or as I like to call them, young people. They have different expectations. They see the world quite differently from me. And they're brought up on Amazon. They're used to this whole consumerization. They haven't been brought up on with CVs and job boards and all of that kind of stuff. And it's how do we engage with those people? They have different expectations about their work in terms of freelancing, gig economy, and the scary thing, they all use their mobile and social media, and in not many years' time, they will be the majority of the UK, well, the world's workforce. So you need to think about how you engage with those people. And again, coming back to that passive targets, using things like chatbots. And I know Yodel are going to do some stuff on this later. But using a chatbot to actually engage with somebody on, if that nurse is applying for or looking at a job on social media on their mobile at 3 o'clock in the morning, how are you going to deal with that? And actually, a chatbot is a really interesting way of doing that. Chatbots basically come in two forms. You get your boring menu-driven chatbots, and you get your AI-powered natural language ones. The difference is, obviously, you get a much more tailored user experience. And there's a cost implication as well. And I think that the thing that we're going to find next is, for anyone that's seen the Google thing where they ring up the restaurant and they book, it's either they book a restaurant or a hairdresser's or something like that. And so these chatbots are going to very quickly move to speech. And how we use those tools to engage with these candidates, these different demographics and these passive candidates, I think will be really fundamental. And what's great is, by the way, these things drive your return on investment like nothing else. You're talking about 5+ times response rates with a chatbot versus without, particularly if you use Taleo, in which case it's about 1,000. Last one, downward pressure on costs. And I think, personally, I believe that one of the reasons there's so many people in this room is, companies recognize that they want to bring this stuff in-house and the talent, and they want to drive down cost. And that's often at the expense of the recruitment agencies. But there's certainly a push to drive those costs down. And what I think is happening is that we're seeing that people are using those recruitment agency fees to fund technology and automation. And that's why there's so many people like us out there in terms of technology suppliers at this particular moment in time, because those budgets are being freed up from the traditional method of spending on recruitment agencies and invested in improving the process. And I think the key thing to remember in all of this is that the process remains the same. So you take your process, and then you think about, where is it that I, as a recruiter, add value? And if I don't add value, I should probably automate. And when you think about that, in very specific terms, the thing that it is that you do that adds the most value to your organization is the actual persuading people, as a brand advocate, to come and work for them. The rest of it is largely process. You know, we can automate the top of the funnel in terms of advertising. We can automate the sourcing piece. We can automate the talent pipelining. We can automate the pre-screening. We can do video interviews. There are even companies out there that will assess video interviews using machine learning. Slightly scary, but they can. Whether it works yet, another question. And so on and so forth. But at some point, there has to be a human being that sits in that room and says why it is so brilliant to work for your organizations. And that is a bit that I don't personally think will ever be taken over by a AI machine learning robot.